The video that destroyed Robert Blackmore's life lasted exactly 2 minutes and 17 seconds. It started with his wife standing at a microphone in Boston's Meridian Grand Hotel ballroom, holding a folder of documents while 300 of the city's most powerful business leaders watched in frozen silence. Every algorithm my husband just received this award for? Beatrice Montgomery Blackmore's voice was steady, clear, devastating. I created them. Every single one. The camera caught Robert's face going white. His hands trembled around the Innovation Leadership Award he'd accepted moments earlier, an award celebrating technology he'd stolen from the woman now exposing him. The Peterson Maritime Optimization System, the real-time inventory tracking protocols, the predictive demand modeling worth over $200 million. She lifted the folder higher. All originated from my work that was systematically stolen and rebranded as his innovation. That's when Robert lost control. Security! His voice cracked across the ballroom. Get this woman out of here! Two security guards appeared, their faces uncertain as they approached the stage. Every phone in the room was recording now. She's having a breakdown, Robert shouted, pointing at his wife with shaking fingers. She's confused and irrational. These are complete delusions. But Beatrice didn't flinch. She stood there with perfect composure, even as the guards moved to flank her. I have development logs, code comments in my distinctive style, and revision histories proving every claim, she said calmly. Mr. Blackmore built his recent success on intellectual property theft from his own wife. I said, get her out! Robert's desperation was raw now, visible. She doesn't belong here. Remove her immediately. The shock of watching a billionaire tech mogul have his own wife forcibly escorted from his award ceremony left the crowd speechless. As security guided Beatrice toward the exit, she turned back one final time. The truth always surfaces. I suggest you all examine very carefully who really created these innovations. Within 3 hours, the video had 12 million views. By morning, our Blackmore gate was trending worldwide. What Robert didn't know as he stood there, his reputation crumbling in real time, was that his wife's public humiliation wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of his complete destruction. Before we reveal how she systematically dismantled his empire and became CEO of the very company he stole, hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were untouchable. Drop a comment. Have you ever watched someone steal credit for your work? 3 months before that viral video destroyed everything, Beatrice Montgomery Blackmore believed she had the perfect marriage. The Beacon Hill mansion gleamed with old money elegance, marble countertops, crystal chandeliers, rooms filled with furniture that had belonged to Robert's family for generations. She'd converted the third-floor study into her workspace, surrounding herself with monitors and whiteboards covered in complex code. At midnight on a Tuesday, while Robert attended yet another charity gala, Beatrice sat alone solving problems that had stumped logistics experts for years. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, refining algorithms that could optimize shipping routes in ways the industry had never imagined. This was where she felt most alive. Not at fundraisers wearing designer gowns, but here, creating revolutionary technology that could transform global supply chains. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m., a solution to real-time inventory tracking that accounted for demand fluctuations, weather patterns, and transportation delays simultaneously. She leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated by what she'd accomplished. Her phone buzzed. Robert. Wrapping up. Mother wants us for brunch tomorrow at 11. No questions about her work. No curiosity about what she'd been developing. Just another social obligation requiring her presence. She pushed the uncomfortable thought away. Marriage meant compromise, didn't it? Robert handled the business relationships while she focused on innovation. That was their partnership. Except lately, partnership felt like a generous word for what they actually had. The next morning, Robert found her still at her desk, reviewing test results. Still tinkering with those delivery routes? His tone carried that familiar condescension, like she was pursuing a hobby rather than groundbreaking technology. You know the development team at Blackmore Industries can handle technical details. I am the development, Beatrice replied, not looking away from her screen. This algorithm could revolutionize the entire shipping industry. I'm sure it could. He squeezed her shoulder with mechanical affection. But you're wearing yourself out unnecessarily. I've got everything under control at the company. Everything under control. She'd heard that phrase more times than she could count. I'd like to present this directly to potential clients, she said. The Peterson Maritime contract would be perfect for this system. Something flickered across Robert's face, too quick to identify. Annoyance? Alarm? That's not how we operate at Blackmore Industries, he said smoothly. Client presentations require market analysis, strategic positioning, proper business context. You focus on the technical side. Let me manage the relationships. The dismissal was gentle but absolute. She was being pushed to the background of her own innovations. Later that week, while using Robert's laptop, hers was running software updates, she noticed a folder labeled Proprietary Development. Curiosity pulled her toward it. Inside were her algorithms, her code, her documentation. But every file had been stripped of her digital signature. Development logs listed Robert as the primary creator, with vague mentions of technical consulting for implementation. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't collaboration. Find what you needed. Robert's voice from the doorway made her jump. She closed the laptop quickly, heart racing. Just checking my email. Good. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Mother's expecting us in 20 minutes. That sweater isn't appropriate for the country club. Beatrice nodded, moving past him toward their bedroom. But something had fundamentally shifted. The perfect marriage she'd been living was built on lies she was only beginning to understand. The Tuesday that destroyed Beatrice's world started like any other. She was debugging code in her study when Robert's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter downstairs. He was in the shower, singing off-key as he prepared for another day of business meetings funded by her stolen innovations. Beatrice went down to refill her coffee. The phone lit up with a message preview she couldn't help but see. Last night was incredible. Can't wait for Chicago. See. Her hand froze on the coffee pot. Chicago. Robert had mentioned a trip to Chicago next weekend. Something about tedious acquisition meetings that would bore her. The phone was still unlocked from his morning alarm. She picked it up, her heart pounding. What she found in his messages with Julia Rawlings made the kitchen floor feel unsteady beneath her feet. Months of texts, hundreds of them, professional boundaries that had dissolved into something unmistakably intimate, plans for secret weekend getaways, photos from hotel rooms he'd claimed were solo business trips. My wife has no idea what real partnership looks like. You understand business strategy in ways she never could. Soon we won't have to hide this anymore. Each message felt like a physical blow, but Beatrice kept scrolling, some terrible instinct telling her the betrayal went deeper than infidelity. She was right. 2 weeks ago, Julia had sent, "The patent attorneys confirmed everything is ready. Your name is the only one listed as inventor." Robert's response, perfect. The algorithms are finally ready for filing. Your wife's work is about to make us very, very rich. Julia, she'll never know. By the time anyone questions it, you'll be too established for it to matter. Robert, exactly. She's too passive to fight back anyway. The phone nearly slipped from Beatrice's trembling hands. She read the exchange 3 more times, making absolutely certain she understood what she was seeing. Her husband wasn't just having an affair. He was systematically stealing her intellectual property with his mistress as an accomplice. They were filing patents under his name, marketing her innovations as his breakthroughs, and planning to profit from years of her work while keeping her completely in the dark. The affair was bad enough. But this was calculated, methodical erasure of everything she'd created. 20 minutes later, Robert walked into the kitchen wearing his tailored navy suit, utterly oblivious to the fact that his entire deception had just collapsed. "Morning, sweetheart." He kissed her forehead with the same false affection he'd been performing for months. "Don't wait up tonight. Board dinner at the Union Club runs late." Beatrice forced a smile that felt like shattered glass on her face. "Of course. I'll work on the Peterson optimization project." "Still working on those routing protocols?" His laugh was indulgent, dismissive. "You know you don't need to push yourself so hard anymore. I've got everything managed at the company." Everything managed, including the systematic theft of her life's work. "Actually, I had a breakthrough last night," she said, watching his reaction carefully. a new predictive model that could be worth millions in licensing. Interest flashed across Robert's face, not pride or excitement for her accomplishment, but something colder, the look of a man calculating how to steal from his wife yet again. That sounds promising. Email me your notes later? I'd love to review what you've developed. Of course he would. Another innovation to copy, scrub of her authorship, and claim as his own genius. I'll send everything over, Beatrice replied evenly. Robert left for work with his usual confident stride, completely unaware that his marriage had just ended in the time it took him to shower. As his car disappeared down the street, Beatrice sat at the kitchen table staring at her coffee. The woman who'd discovered her husband's betrayal 30 minutes ago was already transforming into someone entirely different, someone who understood exactly what needed to happen next. Robert thought she was too passive to fight back. He'd built his entire strategy on that assumption, that she'd remain silent, isolated, and controllable while he stole everything she'd created. He was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. For 3 weeks after discovering Robert's betrayal, Beatrice became an expert at deception. She smiled at charity functions, attended dinner parties with his business associates, made polite conversation with his mother about garden club memberships, all while systematically gathering evidence that would destroy everything he'd built on her stolen work. The perfect wife routine required Oscar-worthy performance. Robert never suspected that the woman who kissed him goodnight was spending her nights dismantling his entire empire. At 2 a.m., when Robert slept soundly beside her, Beatrice would slip into her study and access Blackmore Industries servers. Robert had been careless with security credentials, arrogant enough to believe his wife would never think to use them against him. What she found exceeded her worst fears. The patents were just the beginning. Every algorithm she'd developed over 3 years had been filed under Robert's name as sole inventor. The documentation was sophisticated: fake development timelines, fabricated research notes, even falsified consultant agreements that made it appear he'd hired outside experts for minor technical assistance. But the financial projections made her blood run cold. Her Peterson maritime optimization system alone was projected to generate $200 million in revenue over 5 years. The real-time inventory tracking protocols, another $150 million. Technologies she'd created in their third-floor study were funding Robert's entire business expansion. Marketing materials featured him on glossy brochures as the visionary behind revolutionary logistics technology. Industry publications had written profiles calling him a digital pioneer and old money embracing new innovation. Not once did her name appear anywhere. She copied everything to encrypted drives, development logs, email chains between Robert and Julia discussing the theft, patent applications, financial forecasts. Every piece of evidence was backed up in 3 separate locations, protected by encryption protocols she designed herself. Then she found the Future Acquisitions folder. Robert's fraud wasn't limited to stealing from his wife. He'd been targeting dozens of small inventors and startup companies, analyzing their technologies for acquisition potential. The folder contained detailed plans, identify valuable innovations, offer consulting contracts that included predatory intellectual property clauses, then absorb the technology through legal maneuvering backed by superior financial resources. One file described a retired engineer in Portland whose warehouse optimization system had been acquired after he'd signed what he thought was a simple consulting agreement. Another detailed a graduate student whose breakthrough in demand forecasting had somehow become Blackmore Industries' property after a single paid project. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was a systematic business model built on exploiting brilliant people who trusted the wrong company. Beatrice's investigation turned up one more crucial detail: the upcoming International Business Excellence Gala. Robert had been nominated for the Innovation Leadership Award, celebrating his groundbreaking contributions to supply chain technology. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Perfect. While Robert attended another board meeting with Julia, Beatrice contacted a former colleague at MIT. Within 48 hours, she had press credentials as a freelance technology journalist covering innovation in logistics. She wouldn't be Robert's +1, relegated to the back tables while he celebrated stolen success. She'd enter that ballroom on her own terms, with evidence that would expose him in front of Boston's entire business elite. The gala invitation arrived, Robert mentioned casually over breakfast 2 weeks later. I'll need you to stay home that evening. Limited seating, industry professionals only. Beatrice stirred her coffee, keeping her expression neutral. Of course, I understand completely. Relief washed over Robert's face. He thought he'd successfully sidelined her again. He had no idea she'd already planned every detail of his public destruction. The evidence was secured. The credentials were confirmed. Her presentation was prepared down to the last devastating detail. Robert had taught her something valuable during their marriage. The difference between being stolen from and being defeated. She'd been stolen from systematically for 3 years. But defeat? That was never going to happen. The night of the gala would mark the beginning of Robert's reckoning. He'd stand on that stage accepting an award for her work, surrounded by the business community he'd deceived, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Beatrice had 3 more weeks to finalize her strategy. 3 weeks until Robert Blackmore learned that underestimating your victim was the most expensive mistake a thief could make. The Meridian Grand Hotel ballroom glowed with concentrated wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across tables, adorned with white roses and champagne flutes. Boston's business elite mingled in designer gowns and custom tuxedos, their laughter echoing off of marble columns. Beatrice entered wearing a midnight blue gown that made her auburn hair gleam like fire. Her press credentials hung from a lanyard around her neck. Official, legitimate, unstoppable. Robert stood near the head table, resplendent in his tuxedo, completely unaware his wife had just walked into his award ceremony. He was too focused on Julia Rawlings, whose scarlet dress matched the flush on her cheeks as Robert whispered something that made her laugh. Their body language told the whole story. They stood together near the head table, their conversation animated and intimate. The way they looked at each other, with shared glances and knowing smiles, told a story that had nothing to do with professional partnership. Beatrice felt ice crystallize in her chest as she watched them. Not jealousy. That emotion had burned away weeks ago. This was something colder and far more dangerous. She made her way across the ballroom, careful to stay out of Robert's sightline. The cocktail hour was in full swing, giving her time before the award ceremony began. Time to have a very specific conversation. Julia excused herself from Robert's side, heading toward the ornate powder room near the main entrance. Beatrice followed, waiting until they were alone among the gilded mirrors and marble countertops. Congratulations on Robert's award, Beatrice said, her voice perfectly pleasant. Julia spun around, champagne flute nearly slipping from her fingers. Her face cycled through shock, fear, then settled on defensive arrogance. Beatrice, what are you doing here? Covering the Innovation Awards for a technology publication. It's fascinating to see who gets recognized for breakthrough developments. The two women faced each other in the mirrored space, tension crackling between them like electricity. Look, Julia said, straightening to her full height, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing by showing up here, but tell me about the Peterson Maritime Optimization System, Beatrice interrupted. What makes it revolutionary? Julia blinked. Excuse me? The algorithms Robert's being celebrated for tonight. Surely you understand the technical innovations given your role as strategic development consultant. Color rose in Julia's cheeks. I don't need to understand technical details. That's what development teams handle. Interesting, because according to your company's public filings, Blackmore Industries doesn't employ any significant programming staff. So who exactly developed these revolutionary algorithms? The question hung between them like poison. Robert is brilliant enough to handle development personally, Julia snapped. Unlike some people, he doesn't need to prove himself by questioning other people's achievements. Can you explain the difference between predictive routing and reactive optimization? Beatrice asked calmly. That's not relevant. What about the computational complexity of real-time inventory tracking across distributed networks? Julia's confident facade cracked. I manage strategic partnerships, not technical specifications. Right, you manage strategic partnerships. Beatrice let the word settle. Is that what you call helping Robert steal intellectual property from his wife? The accusation landed like a physical blow. Julia's face went pale beneath her foundation. That's ridiculous. You're just jealous because Robert has moved beyond needing your amateur contributions? Amateur contributions, Beatrice repeated the phrase with deadly calm. Is that what you call 3 years of revolutionary algorithm development? The Peterson maritime system that's generated over 200 million? The inventory tracking protocols saving companies millions in waste? With each technical detail, Julia's composure eroded further. These weren't vague claims. They were specific, sophisticated innovations that required deep expertise to even understand, let alone create. Even if that were true, it doesn't matter anymore, Julia said, her voice lacking conviction. Robert is moving forward with his career. He needs someone who can actually contribute to his success, not just code in the background like some kind of technical servant. Someone like you? Someone like me? Julia's smile turned vicious. Robert hasn't been happy with you for years. You're not sophisticated enough, not social enough, not woman enough to be the partner he deserves. I give him things you never could: passion, ambition, the kind of support that actually matters in building an empire. Beatrice absorbed the attack without flinching, recognizing it for what it was: desperate cruelty from someone who knew their success was built on lies. You're right about one thing, Beatrice said quietly. Robert does need a different kind of partner. Someone willing to help him commit fraud. Someone comfortable with theft. Someone who can participate in stealing from others without conscience. She moved toward the door, then paused. But here's what you haven't considered, Julia. A man who systematically steals from his own wife will eventually steal from his accomplice too. When this all falls apart, and it will, you'll discover that thieves have no loyalty to anyone. Beatrice left Julia standing alone among the mirrors, her reflection multiplied in endless reproductions of barely suppressed panic. The award ceremony would begin in 15 minutes. Time to finish what she'd started. The lights dimmed as dinner concluded. 300 guests settled into their seats, champagne glasses raised, ready to celebrate excellence in business innovation. The MC's voice boomed through the sound system, praising Robert's visionary leadership and groundbreaking contributions to supply chain technology. Every word described Beatrice's stolen work, repackaged as her husband's genius. Robert rose from the head table to thunderous applause, Julia beaming at him like he'd actually earned this moment. Under the spotlight, he looked every inch the successful entrepreneur, confident, charming, completely deserving. This award represents years of dedication to solving impossible problems, Robert began, his voice smooth and practiced. Supply chain optimization seemed like an insurmountable challenge until we developed these revolutionary algorithms. We, as if Beatrice had been part of some collaborative effort rather than the sole creator whose innovations he'd systematically stolen. Innovation requires vision, persistence, and the courage to challenge conventional thinking. He paused for effect, soaking in the admiration of Boston's business elite. I want to thank everyone who helped make this technology a reality. His eyes found Julia at the head table. The camera following his speech captured her radiant smile. Especially those who truly understand what it takes to build something extraordinary. Not once did Robert glance toward the back of the room where his wife had been relegated months ago. In his version of events, she simply didn't exist. The applause was deafening as Robert raised the Crystal Award. He was untouchable now, validated by the most prestigious recognition in the industry. Or so he thought. As Robert stepped away from the podium, Beatrice rose from her seat in the press section. Her midnight blue gown caught the light as she made her way to the stage. Her press credentials visible, her expression calm and determined. The room noticed. Whispers started spreading through the tables. "Excuse me," Beatrice said, her voice cutting through the murmurs as she approached the microphone. "I need to address something important about tonight's recognition." Robert froze, his face drained of color as he recognized his wife standing at the podium he'd just vacated. "For those who don't know me, I'm Beatrice Montgomery Blackmore, Robert's wife." She held up the folder she'd been carrying. "And I need to clarify something about the technology Mr. Blackmore just received this award for." The ballroom fell absolutely silent. Every algorithm described in tonight's presentation originated from my development work over the past 3 years. The Peterson Maritime Optimization System, the real-time inventory tracking protocols, the predictive demand modeling worth over $200 million in revenue. She opened the folder, pulling out documentation. I have development logs with my digital fingerprints, code comments in my distinctive style, revision histories proving the creation timeline. All of this technology was systematically stolen from me and rebranded as my husband's innovation. The whispers exploded into shocked conversation. Robert's chest began heaving. "This is absurd," he shouted, striding toward the stage. "Security, get this woman out of here." Two security guards appeared at the edge of the ballroom, uncertainty written across their faces as they looked between the billionaire and his wife. "She's having some kind of breakdown." Robert's voice cracked with desperation. "She's confused and irrational. These claims are completely delusional." But Beatrice remained composed, even as every phone in the room started recording. "I have time-stamped backups establishing my authorship. Email chains between Mr. Blackmore and his strategic development consultant discussing the theft." She looked directly at Julia, whose face had gone ashen. "Including messages about filing patents under his name for technology I created." I said, "Get her out." Robert's polished facade shattered completely. "She doesn't belong here. Remove her immediately." The security guards moved forward, clearly reluctant but bound by their employment. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as they approached Beatrice. "That's quite all right," she said, stepping away from the microphone with perfect dignity. "I've presented the evidence that matters." As the guards escorted her toward the exit, Beatrice turned back to address the crowd one final time. "The truth always surfaces, ladies and gentlemen. I suggest you all examine very carefully who actually created the innovations being celebrated tonight." The doors closed behind her, leaving Robert standing in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by 300 witnesses to his complete professional destruction. Nobody applauded. Nobody moved. They simply stared at the man who just had his own wife removed from his award ceremony for exposing his theft. Someone's phone was still recording. Within 3 hours, the video had 12 million views. By morning, Nash Blackmore Gate was trending across every platform. What Robert didn't realize as that video spread across the internet, destroying his reputation in real time, was that his wife's public humiliation wasn't the end of her story. Beatrice was just getting started. Smash that like button to see the systematic revenge that followed, and stick around, because what happens next will blow your mind. While Robert scrambled to contain the viral video disaster, Beatrice returned to the Beacon Hill mansion one final time. The house was empty. Robert's frantic phone calls to his lawyers and PR team were keeping him occupied downtown, buying her the window she needed. By now, Nash Blackmore Gate was trending across every social media platform, the video replaying his meltdown in endless loops for millions of viewers. Good. Let him deal with the consequences of his own actions. Beatrice went straight to Robert's study. His computer still sat unlocked, abandoned in his rush to damage control the Gala catastrophe. She copied every remaining file he'd thought was safely hidden. Additional email chains, financial documents showing exactly how much profit he'd generated from her stolen innovations, evidence of the other inventors he targeted. Everything was transferred to encrypted drives and uploaded to secure cloud storage under accounts Robert would never find. The evidence was now beyond his reach, protected and ready for whatever legal battles lay ahead. Next came the practical matters. She worked quickly, knowing Robert would eventually return from his crisis management. Within the hour, she'd accessed their joint financial accounts and systematically transferred her portion to new accounts established under her maiden name. Robert had been clever about moving money into accounts she supposedly couldn't touch, preparing for the divorce he'd been planning. But two could play that game. She secured $180,000, not a fortune by Blackmore standards, but enough to rebuild somewhere far from Boston's suffocating social circles. The transfers were complete and irreversible before Robert would even think to freeze the accounts. Packing took 20 minutes. She chose practical clothes, comfortable shoes, her personal laptop, and the backup drives containing proof of Robert's fraud. Everything else, the designer gowns, the jewelry from his family vault, The expensive accessories that had never really been hers stayed behind. None of it mattered. None of it had ever been real. The wedding ring came off her finger with surprising ease after 3 years of wearing it. That flawless 3-carat diamond had represented infinite possibility once. Now it just felt like evidence of her own naive trust. She placed it carefully on Robert's pillow, along with a handwritten note. I'm taking back what was always mine. No explanations, no accusations. Just a simple declaration of intent that would haunt him far more than any lengthy confrontation. Beatrice loaded her single suitcase into her Honda Civic, the modest car she'd kept from her pre-marriage life, now her escape vehicle. Robert's Porsche and his mother's vintage Mercedes sat beside it in the garage, monuments to inherited wealth built on stolen brilliance. She chose her anonymous car deliberately, perfect for disappearing. The drive to California would take 4 days. 4 days to plan her next move. 4 days to transform from Robert Blackmore's humiliated wife into someone entirely new. As she pulled out of the driveway, Beatrice glanced back at the mansion one final time. That beautiful prison had represented everything she thought she wanted: security, belonging, partnership. Instead, it had been the stage for her systematic erasure. Boston disappeared in her rearview mirror as she drove west into the night. The city that had witnessed her public humiliation was shrinking into the distance, along with everything Robert had tried to make her believe about herself. She wasn't the passive wife he described to Julia. She wasn't the amateur programmer he'd dismissed to his business associates. She wasn't the convenient victim he'd assumed would stay silent forever. She was Beatrice Montgomery, creator of revolutionary technology that had transformed an industry. And she was heading to California, the land where brilliant minds built empires based on actual merit, not theft and deception. Robert thought the viral video was his worst nightmare. He had no idea the real reckoning was only beginning. Robert's counterattack began within 48 hours of the viral video. His legal team held a press conference painting Beatrice as a woman suffering from delusions, unable to accept her husband's success. They claimed mental instability, cited the stress of their marriage, and suggested she'd fabricated evidence out of jealousy and spite. Mrs. Blackmore is clearly experiencing a psychological crisis, Robert's attorney announced to assembled media. These wild accusations about intellectual property theft are the fantasy of an unstable individual who resents her husband's achievements. The strategy might have worked if not for one critical problem. 12 million people had watched Robert lose complete control at that gala. The video showed a guilty man panicking, not an innocent victim defending himself against false claims. Public opinion turned decisively against him. Within weeks, 60 Minutes launched an investigation into intellectual property theft in the technology industry. The segment featured Beatrice prominently, with forensic analysts examining her code and comparing it to the algorithms Robert had patented under his name. The evidence was overwhelming. Every algorithm bore her distinctive coding style, specific approaches to problem solving, unique comment structures, mathematical techniques that were unmistakably hers. Expert after expert confirmed what Beatrice had been saying. This technology could not have been developed by Robert Blackmore. The code signatures are as unique as fingerprints, one MIT professor explained on camera. These innovations originated from a single brilliant mind, and that mind belongs to Mrs. Blackmore. The divorce proceedings became a public spectacle that riveted Boston's business community. Under oath, Julia was forced to admit her role in the systematic theft. Did you knowingly assist Mr. Blackmore in appropriating his wife's intellectual property? Beatrice's attorney asked. Julia's voice was barely audible. I thought we were protecting the company's interests. Were you aware you were helping him steal technology from his own wife? A long pause. Yes. The courtroom erupted. Robert sat motionless, watching his defense crumble in real time. But the most devastating moment came when Robert took the stand in his own defense. Under cross-examination, he couldn't explain the basic concepts behind the innovations he'd claimed to develop. Mr. Blackmore, can you describe the computational approach used in your Peterson Maritime optimization system? Robert fumbled through technical jargon that made no sense. His explanation contradicted the actual methodology used in the algorithms. And the predictive demand modeling protocols? Can you walk us through the mathematical framework? I don't see how these technical details are relevant to answer the question, Mr. Blackmore. He couldn't. Not coherently, not convincingly. Every attempt to explain his own technology revealed the fundamental truth. He had no idea how any of it actually worked because he hadn't created any of it. The judge's ruling was unequivocal. The court officially recognized Beatrice Montgomery as the true inventor of the disputed technologies. Robert was ordered to pay $50 million in immediate compensation, plus ongoing royalties from any technology derived from her innovations. More damaging than the financial settlement was the court's public statement. Mr. Blackmore engaged in systematic intellectual property theft from his wife, a pattern of fraudulent behavior that violated both marital trust and legal standards. Robert's reputation was destroyed beyond any possibility of repair. Business partners abandoned him. Investors withdrew funding. The family legacy that had taken generations to build collapsed under the weight of his greed and dishonesty. Meanwhile, Beatrice had already disappeared to California, ready to build something far more valuable than anything Robert had ever stolen. An empire based on authentic innovation and ethical business practices. The man who thought he could erase his wife had instead erased himself. TechFlow Solutions began in a shared office space in San Jose, sandwiched between a startup developing meal kit apps and a team working on cryptocurrency wallets. Beatrice had a desk, a coffee maker, and the settlement money that would fund her first 6 months. More importantly, she had her mind. The same brilliant mind that had created the technology Robert stole. Except now she was building something even better. Her first client came through a referral from her MIT network. A struggling electronics distributor named Thomson Tech was hemorrhaging money through inefficient routing and inventory management. Their CEO, desperate for solutions, took a chance on the unknown consultant from Boston who'd made headlines by exposing her billionaire husband's fraud. Beatrice spent 3 weeks analyzing their operation. The algorithms she developed weren't just improvements on her previous work. They were revolutionary leaps forward. She'd learned from Robert's theft, understanding now how to protect innovations while making them even more powerful. The results shocked everyone. Thomson Tech's distribution costs dropped by 40%. Their delivery times improved by half. Inventory waste became almost non-existent. Within 6 months, their profits had increased by 300%. Word spread through Silicon Valley's tight-knit business community like wildfire. The woman who'd been publicly humiliated at a Boston Gala was quietly transforming companies in California with technology that made her stolen innovations look primitive by comparison. That's when Patricia Chen requested a meeting. They met at a coffee shop in Palo Alto. Two brilliant women discussing algorithms and market disruption, while Robert continued his desperate attempts to salvage his reputation 3,000 miles away. "I've been tracking what you're building," Patricia said, her eyes intense with interest. "This isn't just superior software. You're reimagining how intellectual property protection works." The partnership changed everything. Patricia's firm, Meridian Ventures, offered Beatrice $12 million in initial funding. But more valuable than the capital was Patricia's vision for what TechFlow could become. Together, they developed something unprecedented, a blockchain-based development platform that made intellectual property theft literally impossible. Every algorithm, every code improvement, every breakthrough was permanently recorded in an immutable digital ledger that identified true creators and tracked the development process in real time. Companies using TechFlow's system couldn't steal innovations because the blockchain automatically documented every contribution and modification. The technology was transparent, ethical, and revolutionary. But Beatrice's masterstroke went deeper than prevention. She began recruiting the same inventors and small companies that Robert had targeted in his future acquisitions folder. Brilliant minds who'd been robbed by corporate predators now offered development resources, legal protection, and genuinely fair profit-sharing arrangements. The roster grew rapidly. A retired engineer from Portland whose warehouse optimization system had been stolen. A graduate student whose forecasting breakthrough had been appropriated. Dozens of innovators who'd been exploited by companies like Blackmore Industries, all hungry for authentic partnership. Within 3 years, TechFlow's network included over 200 innovative creators who had experienced systematic theft firsthand. They weren't just clients. They were collaborators building something that would change the entire industry's approach to innovation. Major corporations began migrating away from traditional consulting firms toward TechFlow's transparently developed alternatives. The financial impact was staggering. What started in a shared office space was becoming a Silicon Valley sensation, valued at over $300 million. Business publications started featuring Beatrice's story, not as Robert's wrong wife, but as a visionary leader who transformed personal betrayal into an ethical business revolution. Forbes ran a profile titled "The Real Innovator: How One Woman Changed Tech Industry Standards." Robert's name wasn't mentioned once. The collapse of Blackmore Industries happened slowly, then all at once. It started with Peterson Maritime, the same company whose $200 million contract had been built on Beatrice's stolen algorithms. 6 months after the viral video, they quietly terminated their relationship with Robert and signed with TechFlow Solutions instead. "We need to partner with companies that share our values," their CEO explained in a carefully worded press release. The unspoken message was clear. They wouldn't do business with known thieves. Other corporations followed. Major clients who'd celebrated Robert's innovations suddenly discovered they preferred working with the actual creator of the technology. One by one, Blackmore Industries' most lucrative contracts migrated to TechFlow's ethically developed alternatives. Each departure was another wound Robert couldn't stop bleeding. Then Business Ethics Quarterly published their investigation. The article was titled "The Innovation Theft Economy: How Established Companies Exploit Creators." Robert's company became the central case study, a cautionary tale about corporate predation in the technology sector. The piece included forensic analysis of his business practices, interviews with the inventors he'd targeted, and devastating screenshots from the viral Gala video. Mr. Blackmore's reaction when confronted with evidence of his theft speaks volumes, the article concluded. This is a man who built his reputation on appropriation rather than creation, and the technology industry must do better. The publication won a national magazine award. Robert's humiliation became required reading in business ethics courses at major universities. Forbes published their annual Most Innovative Companies issue 3 months later. TechFlow Solutions debuted at number 12, with Beatrice featured on the cover under the headline, "The Real Innovator: How Ethical Technology Conquered Corporate Theft." The profile detailed her journey from public humiliation to industry leadership, emphasizing how she'd transformed personal betrayal into systematic change. Readers couldn't get enough of the story. Brilliant woman exposes husband's fraud, then builds superior company that makes his theft obsolete. Blackmore Industries didn't appear on the list at all, not even in the honorable mentions. That's when federal investigators came knocking. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched a formal investigation into Robert's business practices. Had he defrauded investors by claiming technology as proprietary when it was actually stolen? Had financial projections been based on fraudulent intellectual property claims? The FBI joined the investigation, examining whether Robert's systematic targeting of other inventors constituted a pattern of criminal fraud. Robert's response was predictably desperate: expensive lawyers, aggressive denials, and ultimately futile lawsuits against publications, former employees, and even TechFlow Solutions itself. Every legal challenge failed spectacularly. Judges dismissed his claims as frivolous attempts to silence legitimate criticism. Each lawsuit generated fresh rounds of negative publicity, reminding the world of the viral video that had started everything. The Blackmore family name, respected in Boston business circles for over a century, became synonymous with fraud and theft. Robert's grandfather had built the company through hard work and ethical dealing. His father had expanded it through strategic partnerships and innovation. Robert had destroyed it through greed and arrogance. Board members resigned. Investors withdrew funding. The mansion in Beacon Hill was quietly listed for sale to pay mounting legal fees and settlement obligations. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in California, Beatrice watched the systematic destruction of her ex-husband's empire with cold satisfaction. She hadn't needed to actively fight him. She'd simply built something better, something ethical, something that made his stolen success look pathetic by comparison. The best revenge wasn't destroying Robert directly, it was making him irrelevant. 5 years after that viral video destroyed his reputation, Robert Blackmore made the call he'd sworn he'd never make. Beatrice was reviewing quarterly reports in her San Jose office when an unknown number appeared on her phone. She almost ignored it. Then something told her to answer. Beatrice. Robert's voice sounded hollow, stripped of the arrogance she remembered. We need to talk. She leaned back in her chair, saying nothing. Let him fill the silence. Blackmore Industries is facing bankruptcy. The words came out strained, each one clearly painful. The board has authorized me to make you an offer. An offer! Beatrice kept her tone neutral, though satisfaction bloomed cold and sharp in her chest. They want you to take over as CEO, complete operational control, whatever terms you require. The irony was so perfect it almost made her laugh. The company that had stolen her innovations, that had built its recent success entirely on her appropriated work, was now begging her to save it from collapse. Why would I possibly want to run Blackmore Industries? Robert exhaled slowly. Because you could transform it into something legitimate. The board knows you're the only person with the technical expertise and industry credibility to salvage what's left. What's left? 5 years ago, Blackmore Industries had been valued at over $1 billion. Now it was a failing company, desperately seeking rescue from the woman it had exploited. My reputation never recovered from that video, Robert continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Every time I pitch clients, they've already seen it. 12 million views. It plays on loop in my nightmares. Good, Beatrice thought but didn't say. I've lost everything. The company, the investors, the respect. He paused. I deserve what happened. I know that now. But there are employees who don't deserve to lose their jobs because I was a thief and a fool. Beatrice considered the proposal in silence. She could let Blackmore Industries collapse completely, watch Robert's family legacy disappear into bankruptcy proceedings and failed legal defenses. Or she could do something far more poetic. I'll take the position, she said finally, under specific conditions. Robert's relief was audible. Anything. Name your terms. Complete transparency in all development processes. Full restitution to every inventor your company has exploited. A publicly acknowledged admission of past fraudulent practices, and my name on the company, Montgomery Innovation Group. Done. All of it. Whatever you want. The desperation in his voice was absolute. The billionaire who'd thrown her out of his gala was now begging her to save him. I'll have my lawyers send the contracts, Beatrice said. You'll resign from all positions immediately. She ended the call before Robert could respond. In that moment, sitting in her California office with the settlement she'd forced him to pay and the company he'd lost, Beatrice understood something profound. Victory wasn't just about building something better. It was about taking everything the thief had valued and transforming it into something he could never have created himself. Robert had stolen her work. Now she was taking his legacy. The transformation of Blackmore Industries into Montgomery Innovation Group took 18 months of relentless work. Beatrice walked into the Boston headquarters on her first day as CEO and immediately began dismantling everything Robert had built on stolen foundations. The old guard, executives who'd enabled or ignored his fraudulent practices, were replaced with leaders who understood that genuine innovation couldn't coexist with theft. Her first major initiative shocked the business world. A $50 million restitution fund for every inventor Robert's company had exploited. The retired engineer in Portland, whose warehouse optimization system had been appropriated, received full rights to his technology plus financial compensation. The graduate student whose forecasting breakthrough had been stolen got her patents returned and funding to develop her innovations independently. Dozens of creators who'd been systematically robbed were finally made whole. This isn't charity, Beatrice explained in her first company-wide address. This is acknowledging that our previous business model was built on fraud. We're correcting those wrongs before we move forward. Wall Street analysts questioned the financial wisdom of giving away millions. They stopped questioning when Montgomery Innovation Group's reputation transformed overnight from corporate predator to industry leader in ethical technology development. The cooperative platform she'd pioneered at TechFlow became the foundation of the restructured company. Every algorithm, Every breakthrough, every innovation was tracked through blockchain technology that made intellectual property theft impossible. Creators retained ownership of their work while benefiting from Montgomery's resources and market access. The model proved that morality wasn't just ethically right, it was spectacularly profitable. Within 3 years, Montgomery Innovation Group employed over 5,000 people across 12 countries. The market capitalization exceeded $2.3 billion, surpassing Blackmore Industries' historical peak by nearly 40%. Major corporations competed for partnerships, knowing that Montgomery developed technology came with guaranteed ethical sourcing and transparent development processes. Business schools taught case studies on her turnaround strategy. The Harvard Business Review published a feature titled, "How Ethical Innovation Conquered Corporate Theft." Industry conferences invited Beatrice as keynote speaker, celebrating her transformation of a failing company into a global leader through principles rather than exploitation. Meanwhile, the people who tried to destroy her faced very different outcomes. Robert never faced federal prosecution. He'd fled to Monaco before indictments could be filed, living in a luxury apartment funded by what remained of his family wealth. But exile was its own prison. He couldn't return to the United States without facing criminal charges. His name remained permanently associated with corporate fraud and the viral video that had destroyed his credibility. The legacy he'd inherited and destroyed would never recover. The Blackmore name, once synonymous with Boston business excellence, now served as a cautionary tale about the consequences of systematic theft. Julia's fate was harsher. She'd stayed in the country, believing her cooperation with investigators would earn leniency. Instead, she served 14 months in federal prison for conspiracy to commit fraud and intellectual property theft. Her release came with permanent damage to her professional reputation. No legitimate company would hire someone who'd actively participated in stealing innovations from their creator. The woman who'd mocked Beatrice in that powder room, claiming to be woman enough for Robert, had lost everything while Beatrice built an empire that would outlast them both. 5 years after being thrown out of a luxury gala, Beatrice Montgomery stood as CEO of a company that proved ethical business practices weren't just morally superior. They were more successful than fraud ever could be. She'd taken the company that stole from her and transformed it into something Robert never could have created. A legitimate force for innovation that protected creators rather than exploiting them. The woman Robert had tried to erase had instead erased him, rebuilding his legacy into something worthy of respect.